And it really helped me understand that humans are amazing. They're just beautiful, beautiful creatures. We teach each other, especially, maybe media teaches us that the world is dangerous. You should be afraid of all these people, but humans are amazing. We've created a society where we expect you to figure it out. But why? We don't expect them to figure out math, to figure out reading. We help them. So why don't we teach social learning? It might sound crazy at first, but your ability to name your emotions reduces your chance of cancer. The studies show that when we're actually doing something physically, hands-on learning, especially with other people and talking to them about it, we might remember as much as 95%.
Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of Future Fit with Friska. Today I have the master empath, Eric Gonzales-Payne, and he's the founder of the most idyllic school you'll ever set your eyes on. That is the Empathy School in Ubud, Indonesia. Eric, welcome today.
Well, thank you, Friska. That's a beautiful introduction.
And it's not just about schools, but he has a science-based approach to children's learning that is different to anything traditional schools have. I mean, and with 2 master's degrees, one from Harvard, one from University of Georgia, he's well placed to chat to me today about the role of empathy in future fit leaders.
Oh, thank you.
So Eric, before we get into it, I'm super intrigued because I noticed you took a year off learning about empathy from people all around the world. And this is before the era of Google Maps, before the era of GPS tracking. So tell me, how was that hitchhiking all around the world? And what were some of those highlights?
Oh, that was a really impactful experience in my life. Definitely recommend it for everyone. Well, it's a different world now, but so I think it was 2012. And I finished my contract in Cambodia. I was working in Cambodia for 2 years. Great place, great experience. And while I was there, I rented a big house, 7 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and I said to any travelers on Couchsurfing, right, on this website, maybe if you remember it, I said, hey, come here, stay with me, it's free for as long as you want. I put a Google sheet, people would just check to see if there was space. I had 250 people staying with me, and it was gorgeous, it was beautiful. I had so many amazing souls from all around the world. I talked to them and I got excited. When I finished my contract, I hit the road. I started hitchhiking. Sounds a lot easier than it is. It can be pretty difficult sometimes. But I traveled. I traveled about a whole year. I traveled throughout the world. And instead of going to hotels or hostels or something, I would go to different houses around the world and just knock on the door. And then I learned different languages, and I would say, hey, I'm a foreigner here. Can I have a place to sleep tonight? And in countries from China to Thailand to Armenia, Georgia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Turkey, through Europe, the United States, people always said yes. It wasn't a difficulty doing it. They would give me rides, they would give me housing, they would give me food. And it really helped me understand that humans are amazing. They're just beautiful, beautiful creatures. We teach each other, especially, maybe media teaches us that the world is dangerous. You should be afraid of all these people, but humans are amazing. There's so much love, there's so much kindness everywhere. I mean, sometimes I don't even ask to stay. I'm just in a country and they say, hey, do you want to stay the night? Please. Right? Just time and time and time again. So that was a really big experience in my life, and it really helped me understand, that humans are great and I need to learn more about them.
Yep. And so how did that transition to actually teaching children EQ? And I know there's an acronym for it. So can you elaborate a little bit what that is?
Sure. EQ is a good phrase because everyone knows it. But whenever we talk about children, we talk about a phrase called social emotional learning. I'll break it down just to give some more clarity on what that is. So social emotional learning, you can think of 3 separate things. One is the social learning. The second one is empathy for yourself. And the third is empathy for others. So social learning. If I dropped you off right now in a village in the Amazon, would you know what's appropriate and how to behave? Of course not.
Absolutely not. Yep.
So the problem is, though, when you're 1 year old, 4 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, you are being dropped off in this different village. We have such different social expectations of a 1-year-old than we do a 4-year-old. And we don't tell them. We just say, hey, you can't do this without any clear explanation. The thing is, if you give an adult or a child a clear explanation of why you can and cannot do something, they will behave the way you like.
Yes.
And the problem is we've created a society where we expect you to figure it out. But why? We don't expect them to figure out math, to figure out reading. We help them. So why don't we teach social learning? That's the social part of SEL, social emotional learning.
Okay.
The next one is empathy for yourself. Friska, who's your biggest critic in the world?
Myself.
Exactly. So What if from a younger age we can all give ourselves more empathy, more kindness, more love, more understanding of what excites us, and more understanding of what we're afraid of?
Mm,
Would that impact us? And of course it does. So
mm.
that's empathy towards yourself. And once you have that, we can actually work on the next part, which is empathy towards others.
Yep.
When someone is angry, right, there's deep emotions, but they're still trying to convey something to you.
Mm,
If you are in a relaxed place, if you're being mindful, if you're not too stressed out, then you can see behind whatever veil of anger they have, and you can really understand how to support them and what they need at that moment.
mm.
So that's the third component of social emotional learning. Together in an education setting, we combine these to teach kids to have incredibly strong EQs.
Mm. And so, I've been harping on for as long as I can remember that EQ always trumps IQ every day of the week, right? So IQ may get your first foot on the ladder, but if you want to keep climbing, it's the EQ that's going to get you there. So tell me your story. Why did you choose to focus on empathy? Why the empathy school? Why not the kindness school? Why not the mindfulness school? So what was it?
That's a good one. Well, first it goes down to what is empathy. I mean, empathy, if you really break it down, it means to like authentically listen to someone else, to try to understand themselves, but again, also empathy towards yourself, understanding
Mm,
yourself, to really listen to yourself. And all of the evidence that we have about how we can measure the success in your life as an adult, and it could be financial success, it could be marital success, it's not linked to your IQ, it's linked to your EQ,
mm,
right? And we have so many measurements, so many metrics on this. So Dr. Goldman over at Harvard, he has this wonderful, wonderful, actually not even just book, but he's like decades worth of research and
mm,
books. And they focus on how EQ, especially from a work position, from a leadership role, can really impact managers,
mm.
right? So the thing is, if all the evidence shows that EQ is vital, then why do we only teach IQ? So
Yeah.
that was one of the components. And then the thing is, I had kids. I
Yep.
was a teacher, I
Yep.
was teaching, I had kids, and I faced a conundrum. I realized that, yes, I can just go travel the world, go to any international school that I want. My kids would get pretty, like some of the top level education we
Mm,
can offer on earth,
mm,
right? But then I asked myself, would that be enough? And I realized it wouldn't. There would be a day that hopefully I'm 105 on my deathbed and I'm looking back and I regret my action.
mm,
So then I decided, well, then what's wrong? Because remember when I was traveling the world and seeing all these different places?
mm.
Again, I was an educator. So I would ask them, hey, how's the school system here? You know what they told me in every country? It's broken. It doesn't work. It's broken. My kids are bored. They're not happy. They're not learning. And when you hear this in so many different cultures that are so dynamic, so different from each other, you realize that the core problem is where it came from. The education system that we use, we call traditional, we call classic, whatever you want to
Mm,
call it, it is an industrial education model
mm,
created to save money. It's save money and be easy, be quick, be easy to replicate.
mm,
And one of the worst, worst, worst things about it is that it's not actually based on science. It's guesses.
mm.
It's There's been so much research in the last 50, 60 years on how kids learn, and all of this material goes against what we teach in modern schools. Now, things are changing, but
Yep.
very slowly. The problem is the education systems are behemoths. They're
Yes.
extremely slow to change.
Mm,
Now, sometimes they do make changes. Indonesia just released a new curriculum, Merdeka, and wow, they're doing project-based.
mm.
Everyone in the world should be doing that one, but so few people are. But the thing is, we can't just expect, a whole school system to change. So that's why I decided, you know what? Time to create my own
I'm gonna be the
school.
change.
Yeah,
Yep.
because if I'm not, who will?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and it goes to show, like you said, you've traveled all around the world and it's universal, regardless where you're born, where you stand on the socioeconomic ladder. Yeah. And so, I'm talking about change. This is what I do. I help very large organizations transform, and they change, and they're usually large, complex global organizations. And in these particular situations, I've always realized that it's the leaders who lack care of empathy for anyone else that get the worst results. So my challenge is A, they don't realize it, or B, even worse, they realize it and they don't care.
Absolutely.
So what techniques would you use to get these people to want to be more reflective on how they're impacting other people in the organization?
That's a good question. So I can actually tell you what I do with some of my own team members.
Yes.
So, appointing someone to a leadership position is always difficult,
Mm,
right? Because, especially since I can identify their EQ, I know that if they don't have good EQ, they're not going to be great leaders,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things I do early on is if they're the kind of person who has maybe high IQ and they approach everything from this analytical perspective and they just do not have an understanding of the value of EQ, then actually, again, I go back to Dr. Goleman's research. I'll give them the books, let them read it, let them just understand the intrinsic value, because when a person suddenly sees that EQ is high value for them and for the world, they will look more into it.
Yeah.
And now it's this process that leads us to the next.
Right.
Now, after that, it's about the tools. There's a lot of tools out there. One of my favorite tools is nonviolent communication, especially because, I mean, at this point, NVC by Marshall Rosenberg, it's used by, I think, Nissan uses it, Google, Apple, Microsoft, a lot of organizations use it because it allows us to find ways to communicate. And even if you had a low EQ, if you followed the steps, hopefully not too robotically, but if you followed them, you would be able to have a conversation with someone and come to a more empathetic answer. So even if you have low EQ, something like that is a crutch to help you get it to the next step. So it's about giving these tools to different people to support them. Although, ideally, the leader that is put in place has high EQ. When that happens, oh man, my life is so much easier.
I bet. And it's a good point you make. I mean, tools, I'm a big believer in practice makes progress, right? Anything we do the first time, it's awkward. Riding a bike was awkward. Like learning how to drive was awkward, but you keep doing it and then it becomes automatic. And EQ is a skill just like any other where you can get so adept at it that it just becomes ingrained and part of you. So when I went to school, it's going back a while now, emotions were taboo. They weren't talked about, I mean, especially in the Asian culture, especially in the Asian household, but yet they have a massive impact on how we think, what we believe, and ultimately how we act. So what are some of the innovative ways that your school is creating a strong emotionally intelligent core? You know, and really what practices can we take from your school that will help us in the modern day workplace?
Sure. I have a lot I can tell you about that one. So the first thing we do is instead of just teaching the children, we teach the teachers, right? My teachers have about 400 hours a year of direct contact with either, maybe a lecture or an experience. Yesterday I was on campus and we had Thai Buddhist monks. They come every week. They do different types of meditation. Now, I'm not saying meditation is your only tool. It is a tool. So we introduce them to many separate tools because it is an understanding of these that can really help you, have your repertoire to be able to solve a problem. So when it comes to other tools, now again, there's so many possible tools. I want to give you 3 that I like because I also think they're very different from each other. Right? So the first I already told you is nonviolent communication. Again, I think it's really good for human-to-human communication, for that empathy for the others. It's okay for internal empathy, but for others it just works so well. Then there's 2 others that I think they're so amazing because they're so different from each other, yet the exact same. That is just the concept of philosophy of Stoicism and Vipassana Buddhism, right? Meditation. So these are obviously from very different parts of the world, and yet they are so essentially the same. And Stoicism, I think it's a good tool because, again, when you meet people who maybe have low EQ, it's not hard for them to agree to Stoicism. Stoicism is a very logical framework of a concept. Although, quite honestly, you cannot be a Stoic without having a high EQ. It's just not possible, right? On the surface, everything looks logical. But it's really important that everyone understands that every decision you've made in your entire life is not instantly processed by, say, the frontal lobe of your brain, which is a logic processing. It is the very first place that anything is processed is your emotional center of the brain. Let's go back really quick, and then I'll go to some of these tools. Let's say is 25,000 years ago. Your ancestor sees a tiger, right? Can they instantly logically decide what to do? No, it's going to the emotional part of the brain.
Run.
Yeah, run. Right. And then it eventually goes to the logical part of the brain, right? Well, you still have that. Maybe you see a spider, a snake, right? And you get scared. Logically, should you get scared? Not necessarily, right? So the thing is, it's really important to know that because when you know this, it makes these tools a lot easier to use, especially something like Vipassana. I like Vipassana because the concept really boils down to, can we see this tiger? Or maybe a snake, not something so dangerous as a tiger, but we see something that is unpleasant experience for us. Can we focus on this feeling? Can we understand it? And can we just see it for what it is and let it go? Because once we let it go, right, we can make a good decision,
Right.
right? Because the concept really is that our decision is completely affected by our emotional state, how we feel. Now, when I say how we feel, it doesn't even mean labeling it. If you can name it fear, that's one, that can be interesting. But the reality is it's even lower than this human concept of language, right? Our feelings are such a deep, deep part of us, you can't simply label it. Labeling's important, but if you can just feel and understand it, that's what helps. That's a good tool.
Okay.
I can actually tell you about another tool.
Sure.
I was just talking about understanding it without labeling it, but at the same time, if you do label it, we have a lot of great evidence. So there's a lot of really good evidence. One of the researchers from Northeastern University in the US, they were able to do a lot of great research on what's called emotional granularity. So I'm going to give you one of the things that they said. It might sound crazy at first, but your ability to name your emotions reduces your chance of cancer. Sounds bizarre, right? It is logical. Let me explain it. So whenever you can explain your emotions, whenever you can understand them, are you happy? Are you sad? Are you depressed? Right? Whenever you have a larger context that you can explain your world in, then you're actually more likely to go and communicate these with other people. And let's say you really are depressed,
Yeah.
right? And you really do need that help. Just by verbalizing it, you're more likely to get help from someone else. Depressions are hard to escape from, right? It may be impossible by ourselves. We need other people to help us, right? So, we are social creatures after all. So by having this vocabulary and expressing yourself, you're more likely to get support. If you're more likely to get support, you're able to get out of these problems. And problems like depression, anger, all these different stressors, anxiety, they create a lot of stress chemicals, cortisol in your blood. And cortisol...
Because it's being bottled up and you're not...
Yeah,
Okay.
it keeps increasing because you don't know how to release it. You don't have the tools.
Because you don't know what it is, right?
Yeah,
you
that's the
don't
problem.
find the words.
Yeah. So studies actually show that cortisol, the stress hormone, it depresses the immune system. And that, like, we already have studies that show that higher levels of cortisol depress the immune system, which leads to higher rates of cancer because your immune system is your first defense. So yeah, not being able to label your emotions leads to higher rates of cancer. Seems bizarre. The evidence is there.
That's super interesting. So there's a workshop that I deliver as well, and it's called different things. Some leaders are very uncomfortable calling it a culture change workshop, so it can be a high performance workshop. But the crux of the matter is we identify the critical top 5 feelings to success in their organization. Absolutely. And then we identify the 5 feelings that we don't want. Now, what's interesting is that through this exercise, I get leaders and their teams to identify what that feeling looks like in their organization. Because sadness in Shanghai may look very different to sadness in Sydney. So is there any insights or observations you've made how different cultures express emotions?
Sure. Well, the first thing is that actually right now, all of the research says that there is not any universal context to apply these. Early research said it was, but it's been proven false. So right now, and it's really important when you reflect on your world, but right now, if you see me with a smile, with a frown, you cannot understand how I feel, right? Okay. And it could be from culture context, but it could also simply be because you're not me, right? So what I teach my teachers, what I teach my kids is do not assume, right? Ask. So the best way to know how someone feels is ask, and then ask to more details. Because you're right, many of our feelings, we're trying to use a word to label something. And it's based on cultural conditioning, it's based on hunches, based on guesses. So there is no right answer for that. In fact, one of our curriculums we have for young children, and it's being used right now in about 200 schools around the world, we have, I think it's 25 cards. Each of these cards have a little elephant doing different things. And we teach the teachers, we teach the kids that there is no right answer. I say, hey, how do you feel? And then you choose a card, and then you tell me what that means to you and why it means that. But again, you might have an elephant that has fire all around him, and maybe the artist designed it as an angry elephant. And maybe as an adult, you would choose that for angry. Kids, oh my God, sometimes...
It's excitement.
Yeah, they're like, this is me, and it's a fiery, flaming elephant. He's like, I'm happy. Okay, explain. He's like, well, I'm outside, I'm running, I'm having fun, I'm really hot. Because they're associating it with the heat of the experience. So one of the great things is you start understanding these kids haven't been conditioned,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what they see and what adults see is so different. It's so different. So when it comes back to emotions and what we feel and what we label it, you have to remember that we have so much cultural conditioning that even if you chose, like inside of one country, you're going to get, even two people, you're going to get drastically different results. So that's why I always say, how do you feel? Tell me more about it, right? To really try to understand the details.
Yeah.
Because remember, this feeling is labeling something much deeper, a sensation.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more example. And I always tell my students this, and it works so well, and actually a lot of research on it too. Let's say you're nervous. Right now, you're nervous. Well, you have two choices. You can say, hey, I'm nervous, and then you can react to your world based on your nervousness. Or you can say, you know what? That's not nervousness. That's excitement. And you can react to your world on this.
So you're reframing.
Absolutely. And from a scientific perspective, there is no difference in the measurement between nervous and excitement. There's no way for a scientist, for me, to understand which one you are. All I know is you have butterflies in your stomach, but I don't know if it's for excitement or nervousness or the flu. Right? There's no way to know. So we teach the kids this, and it's really important because there's actually great research in the United States on the SAT. And basically the SAT is to get into university, right? Well, your scores may deviate as much as 40% based on how you feel that day.
Wow.
It's a big difference, right?
Yeah, that's the difference between an Ivy League entrance
God.
not. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the really interesting things about that is there's studies that show that, you're about to take an exam, right? And I say, wow, you're so excited, right? And I prime you to be excited. Your scores are going to be significantly higher than if I prime you, wow, you're nervous, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to do badly, right? And it makes sense to our logical human brain, but you have to remember, this is all emotional, right? And we are influenced by however we feel so deeply, so deeply.
It makes sense why some of the world's greatest performers, like rock stars, etc., don't allow anybody into their dressing rooms like half an hour before they get on stage, because they're mentally priming themselves to be in that ideal state.
Absolutely.
And so you said then, you always ask the kids why. Why is it important to know why you feel a certain way?
So for kids, you could say it's for practicing it, but to be honest, for adults, it's also for the same. I think developing your emotional intelligence is a lifelong thing, right? And there's two real big reasons for it. One, if I ask why, then it's not about finding a solution, but it's about finding a way to connect with you, to support you, right? It could be to find a solution, but solution is not often what is needed. What's normally needed is connection. So that's the first one. The second one, and again, this goes for every human, is to remember that whenever we're having an experience, it can be very, very different. What you perceive as terrifying, again, I could perceive as amazing, right? So asking them why they feel that way based on, your observed circumstances, it helps to inform you and make you remember that you can't assume. Right? We like to play this charade game with the kids using these cards, right? And they'll put it on their head. And the great thing about it is the one with the card right here, he's acting out. No, the others are acting it out. All of them are acting out. And some are acting out the physical observation. Others are acting out the different emotion that they see. And the thing is, they interpret different emotions. So it's really hard. It's like one of the most difficult games even for adults because all of us interpret everything differently. Right? And it's that understanding that we are biological creatures that understand the world totally different from each other, that if we can have that in ourselves and we come and communicate with each other, life is easier. If I know that I cannot expect, if I know that whenever I meet you, whenever I'm having a conversation with you, that everything is actually unpredictable, then I will be more likely to talk to you and try to understand it. And it's that check-in. That check-in right there is what leads to success.
Right. Okay. Super enlightening. And I'm just going through in my head, because last night I was watching Billions, an old episode of Billions with my partner, and there was a father and a son in a tense moment. And I said to him, what do you think the dad's feeling? And he goes, oh, he's so proud of his boy, so proud. But then the next thing the father said was, I never want to see you again until I'm on my deathbed. So it goes to show, reading someone's face, we can get it so wrong, get polar opposites.
Yeah, that's why you always ask.
So if you had a megaphone, what is your one key message to the world?
If I have a megaphone, what is my one key message? Well, that would be that everyone should learn, not just do, but learn how to give empathy to themselves. So every time you're stressed, you're
Mm.
actually trying to find solutions to make yourself maybe feel better,
Yep.
right? Well, you could eat a gallon of ice cream, okay? And
Yep.
that actually works. Like the chemical way it works in your brain, it'll make you feel better.
Yep.
But I think we could all agree that's not a desirable outcome,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So what's a better tool? Well, the thing is, once you learn to give empathy to yourself, you realize there's a very wide variety of tools. And there again, there's no answer, right? I think we have 10,000 tools, and all of these came from the exact human place of understanding and connection, and they're different interpretations. Great. Grab a hold of one that you love, right? So the more we can understand ourselves and care about ourselves, the more we can understand others and care about others and make this world a better place.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that we treat other people so much nicer than we treat ourselves?
Oof, that's a hard one. I mean, oh, I don't think I have a great answer for that
Sorry to
one.
get all deep and
Yeah.
intrigued.
No, it's a good one. Why do we do that?
Our critic is so loud and we punish ourselves all the time.
Well, it's hard to say if that's from a earlier life conditioning or if it's because, sometimes our parents tried to condition us. They wanted us to succeed.
Yep.
So they pushed us. And it could just be that same voice. Or it could be, something more ancient. It could be a survival mechanism, right? Because you'd better be succeeding or you might die in the savannah, right? So it's hard to say exactly what it is, but it's a universal human experience. That's one of the things I do love about empathy is it's universal. Right, and other than like very small % of the psychotic population, everyone has the ability to be empathetic and to understand others and themselves. Yeah, and that means that critic inside of you is what every single person has, and it's important for you to remember that, especially when you got to be so careful not to blame someone. When you blame someone, like for example, a few things happen. One, they shut down, right? And two, that critic inside of them is now either angry at me for blaming them or angry at them. And at that point, nothing can be accomplished. We have just completely halted whatever we were doing. So that's why, that's one reason blame's not a good tool, especially if you want to be a good manager.
And so what do you personally do yourself to continuously work on your empathy skills?
It's a good question. So, part of what I do is I lead trainings and I go to these trainings. I was at the Buddhist event yesterday at the school. Those help because I must understand that I'm not wise, right? It's a goal of mine to be wise, but it's not achievable. You must continue to learn and then continue to explore the tools. And again, one of the things that I think is the most important, it's like a pre-tool, is the concept of mindfulness. So Elaine Langer, over at Harvard, she does a lot of great mindfulness material, and I studied it for years. And one of the things that really helped me is just to, whenever I'm having an experience, could be a positive experience or negative experience, could be really anything, but just to pause and then practice this mindful state. Understand where I am, understand how I'm feeling, understand where I'm feeling it, and then go to these tools and say, well, if I don't want to feel that, what tool could I go to? So I think that's the ultimate thing. It's a bit hard, but the more you read into it, the more easier it becomes because you learn it more, and it's fun. Elaine Langer's research is hilarious. It is really interesting. You got to read it.
Okay. And so what was life like before the empathy school? Like what was it that drove you to create this? It's obviously unique, not mainstream, and swimming against the grain.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I was a teacher. I taught in many places, and one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that the education is not based on science, right? I'll give you a good example. Just being in a green environment, the studies show that it lowers our stress hormones, our cortisol levels, right? So then why not have a school that is in nature, right? The second one would be that when we adults do physical activities, but especially when kids do physical activities, they focus more. Your brain rewards you with endorphins when you run, when you work out, right? Well, the same thing with kids. And this chemical is the natural focusing chemical, right? We like to complain about how kids have ADD or ADHD these days. Well, sure, some people have a lack of dopamine in the brain, which is what this is. But the vast majority of humans, they just want to be human. They want to move. So let's say it's empathy school and you just finished your math class. Maybe it was a traditional math class because we're doing division. Division's hard to do hands-on, right? We love to do hands-on, but sometimes you can't, right? So maybe you wasn't the best experience, and now you're going to go to English class. Well, how do we make sure that you enter English class in an incredibly positive state? Well, guess what? Your English class is 400 meters away. So you're running, you're 8 years old, you're running, you're jumping, you're going up a hill, down a hill, hey, there's some monkey bars, and you're physically moving, not just in the playground, but again, your classrooms are so drastically far away that you're able to continue this moving. And then by the time you get there, your brain's pumping with endorphins.
Yeah.
Not only that, we have several snack times throughout the day. Hungry child is a difficult child. Hungry adult is a difficult adult. So it's about having all of the scientifically proven solutions there, right? We know so much, and we do not implement it. I want to go back to the food thing really quick because of how absurd this is. So again, at Empathy School, we have all you can eat. We have a fruit snack in the morning. We have lunch. We have another fruit snack.
All you can eat. Oh my God.
Because I don't want hungry kids, right? And when you think of hungry kids, you think grumpy kids. But no, it's 10,000 times worse than that. There's this great study from the United States. It's called the hungry judge effect. You can actually Wikipedia this one. So what happened is they were looking at judges and if they would give parole. And if you've seen this one, right?
Yes, rings a bell.
So essentially is if the judge is hungry, it's not lunchtime, it's right before lunch, you're not getting parole. But the judge has just had snacks, just had lunch, you have a much higher chance of getting parole. And these judges are a very respected position, right? And if this position that's extremely respected and we think they should be able to be giving justice, if their belly is dictating their actions, it goes back to we're very emotional creatures. We like to pretend we're not. We are. So that goes back to what the school's empathy. It's about understanding how all of these things that in a child's daily life affect their emotional states. And if we can turn them to be positive, then that kid will love learning. It makes me so happy when kids tell me they love learning. My 4-year-old says, I love studying. He doesn't know what it really means, but he's been conditioned. And it's great in that one. But not only that, right? I think the biggest mark of failure for any school is if kids don't want to learn when they leave, right? You're going to be learning your whole life. And if you have lost your love of learning, wow, the school system has failed. The best complaint that I have at the school is that they can't get the kids to go.
They don't want to leave.
Yes, all the time. Because the kids are having so much fun. They're there with their friends. They feel safe. Even though it's only been 3 or 4 days there, they're just so connected.
So that's the learning part. What techniques does your school have to unlearn bad behaviors and habits?
That's a good one. So there's several bad behaviors. There can be ones that you've been taught and ones that are natural. I'm going to go with the natural one first. So we had a student who joined us when he was maybe 4 or 5, and he was known, we were told he was a bully when he came, right? Now, the thing is, I'm careful to use that word because you can have malicious and not malicious actions. What this kid was doing after I met and talked to him, nothing was malicious, okay? He was grabbing kids, jerking kids, pulling, pushing, because he wanted to play with them. He didn't understand the society's expectations. So we had to explain to him what was the expected behavior and why it was expected. And we had to let him, not just we tell him lecture, but he talks to the other kids. The other kids like, I didn't like that. You know, but also give him the opportunity to express himself. I pushed you because I wanted to play. And you know what? When one kid says that and the other kid starts realizing, like, really? Okay, let's go play. They just want to play, right? In NVC, so we do NVC for these communications, but in NVC there's 4 steps. But with like a 5-year-old, we never get to like a 3rd step because after they express what happened and how they feel, they reconnect and they're like, okay, let's go play. Right? Because that's the natural condition of a child, right? So giving these skills, as tools so that they can make their life easier, it definitely is a great one. I'll give you an example for that exact same child. I was giving a tour about a year ago, and there was a family who said, well, I understand why Empathy School is so easy because you have all these, great kids like this kid. And they're pointing out how he's so calm and peaceful and helpful. He'd helped with the tour, right? And they're like, well, yeah, but the reality, is actually much deeper, that it is the experience of the school which helps them become, higher EQ. Then you have the unlearning. Whew, unlearning is hard.
That's the hard part.
It's the hard. But the unlearning, I would say, for kids, we can teach them. The adults are the ones that I have to unlearn the most, especially the teachers.
So how do you do that with your staff?
Sure. Well, the first thing is to really help them understand that they have a worldview. They have a specific worldview that's been conditioned into them, and they need to explore it. Like, don't label it as good and bad. Understand why people took certain actions to teach you certain ways. I'll give you one of the more lighthearted ones that I detest. In Indonesia, it's still very common for, say, a teacher to offer sugar to a child, like a piece of candy, right? Hey, if you do good on your math test, I'm going to give you this candy. So what's happening there is 2 things. One, they're rewarding, right? And the reward, it seems like on the surface, hey, if I reward them, I can motivate them to do it.
Harmless,
Oh my God.
But no.
Reward destroys motivation. ideally, everything you do in your life is intrinsically motivated, right? And it is
Uh-huh.
for the most part. Otherwise, you're just going to stop doing it.
Yeah.
But when you give external motivations, they can work, but for how long, right?
Huh.
That's the thing. Marshall Rosenberg with nonviolent communication, he has this concept that every strategy works,
Yep.
but every strategy has a cost.
Yeah.
Are you willing to pay the cost?
Yep.
And the problem with rewards and with punishments is that sometimes the cost is way more than you're willing to pay, because you're essentially conditioning, especially a child, to take a certain approach in the world. Whereas, you know, you have two choices. Do you want your child to enjoy math because they love math and they think it's very fun to solve it, or because they always get a golden star, right? The worst thing, and it gets really bad and really dark, is that when we're conditioning kids to give them rewards, they start even labeling themselves, or we label them as smart. And it seems like, hey, if I label you as smart, it's a good thing, you're a smart kid. No, no, it isn't. The research shows very, very clearly that if you label a kid as smart, they are unwilling to go try harder things.
Yeah.
Because if you fail, you're not smart. And I'm sorry, but if you're not failing, you're not going forward. The best way to succeed is to fail, and learn from that failure. And that's something I don't want the kids to do. I want them to fail. I want them to fail all the time so they can learn from it. So we don't do rewards. And of course, the second part of that is they're giving sugar. School has a no sugar policy, right? And you know, there's 10,000 reasons for it, but we just don't do it.
Best sugar's in fruit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so if you can't reward kids and call them smart, what would you do? Label the behavior? Like acknowledge the behavior? Like instead of saying you're a smart kid, it's like, well done for getting a A on that test.
So it goes back to the concept of positive psychology. So if a child does something that's truly remarkable, talk about it, explain it. Not just it's good or bad, but really give your real honest opinion. Give them the feedback. That feedback, it creates a loop. And over time, it will help them be able to understand the society more around them. So definitely, do express yourself, do be positive about it. And if you're going to condition a kid, I'm not so comfortable with conditioning, even listen to the word social engineering, conditioning, right? But if you are going to condition them, then what you would do is you'd condition them to be, you're a hard worker. You like to work hard. You like to accomplish your tasks. Because the same study that showed that smart kids wouldn't complete tasks showed that kids who were conditioned that they're hard workers would end up going far beyond your average kid, especially the smart kids. So, I have two sons, and I do talk to them about these things. My older son loves science. Right? He's 10 years old. He wants to be an asteroid miner. So what do? Actually, the most important thing as a father is my presence. Just listen. He's 10 years old. If my 10-year-old wants to tell me about Pokemon, it's not really the Pokemon. He wants to connect with me, right? So being there, being present, telling my child I'm proud of them, that's an important one, right? All these things, they give them this emotional armor, this emotional protection so that when they do face something, they're not going to have very difficult emotional reactions.
And how would your advice be different for adults in the modern workplace? Because when I'm thinking of, driving change and transformation, you have to motivate your people to do something differently. Often stick their neck out. It may fail.
Yes.
Would you give the same advice that you just gave for your child? It's the connection, it's the telling them why, it's the important, it's actually the holding back of rewards and just more the recognition.
Yeah. So if we do recognition, it's not token recognition, not just certificates or something.
It's not just, skippy badge for you.
Well, because that's what half of the rewards are anyway. Sure. So, well, I'm going to give you a really funny story before I tell that about why rewards are bad. There was this really funny incident where a father was coming over to teach, going to teach the PE class, like some just fun thing with the kids, right? And he said, whoever joins me is going to get ice cream. And one of the kids is like, oh, my dad's buying me ice cream later. I'm not going to play. Right? So already the reward failed. And that's important to reflect, when you're adults. You do this and I'll give you more money. Well, maybe I don't need more money. Or I give you more vacation. Maybe I don't need more vacation. Right? The problem is, obviously, as employers, it's hard to actually know what the person needs. But with intrinsic motivation, this desire to grow, this desire to prosper, that's where, as a company, that's where you're going to find all of your richness right there. So if you can do intrinsic motivations, that's the best. So, and the way I do that is by encouraging my team to also fail. I say, look, tell me your plans. What are you doing? And if you fail, it's okay. I understand it. If you succeed, wonderful, right? Because if they're only playing safe, you're only going to get so much. You have to go take risks. And it's lovely to see how that works, especially if you look at teachers. when you give them that, they will come up with the most beautiful, beautiful class materials, curriculums you've ever seen. They'll take something. I'll give you one fun example. So one of my teachers came up with this, and it's the measuring of the distance of some outside of an area parameter, right? Well, in tradition, when you were 7, 8, 9, 10, you studied pretty much the exact same graphs every year. The reason they did that is because you forgot it year to year. Because memorization, we're not that great at it, right? We humans are not a memorization species. So you forgot it, and they were just teaching to you again to make it easier. But you know what? They're spending a week on that every year. So what we do instead, when our kids are 7, we give them rope. And they go to the rice field, and they take some paper and pen. They have to draw the map, and they use the 3 ropes, 1 meter, 5 meters, 10 meters, to measure the distance of the rice field. Now, they're walking in mud, they're in a team, they're under the sun. It's a very emotional experience.
It's like every day is a team building activity day at your school.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it builds teamwork. It builds connection. But by doing all these things together, it actually works more on the brain. The studies show that when we're actually doing something physically, hands-on learning, especially with other people and talking to them about it, we might remember as much as 95%. Whereas memorization, as much as 20%. That's why we do it year after year. So that right there, is just one example that a teacher came up with when I said, don't be afraid of failing, right? Because they were looking at how can we really explore this? How can we make it so they can have tactile learning of measuring something and not just with a ruler, right? I mean, come on, rice field is muddy. That's the best way to do it. And kids love to be muddy, my God. At my school, kids don't wear shoes. They don't want to. Because they don't want to. They don't have to. It's very foot safe. And, if I ask them, do you want to wear shoes? Eventually, all of them just say, no, I don't. And they just take their shoes off because they don't need them. And it's fun. And it's so nice when the mud's between your toes. And don't worry, we have like 20 feet washing stations on campus.
I'm fascinated. I'll have to come for a site visit then.
Come.
So if people want to know more information about you, about the EQ camps that you offer all around the world, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
So first, we have a website, www.empathy.school. That's a great way. We have a website there. You can obviously chat with our team. I also have a little AI bot there. So we wrote an empathy book, right? And it covers.
Of course you did.
It covers many of the things that we did. And the AI, actually, if you ask it a question, you say, hey, explain how Empathy School does this, it will find it in the book and it will give you rewritten excerpts, right, to help explain your question. So I'm really happy with that. So that's a good one. Another one is just go to Instagram, and certainly we have, check us out, empathy.school. I think Instagram is a great way to see what we do. Now, obviously, Instagram is a place where you see pictures, right? So you're not going to see very many math and English lessons. It's very hard to visualize that, right? But you're going to see the kids having a great day. You're going to see many of their emotional experiences that we use to, prime them to have a good day. I'll give you a fun example. In the morning, you come on Monday morning, you're going to get music from my teachers. They're singing songs to you. You're going to get flowers showered on you, right? And this, obviously, it's to prime them to have a truly wonderful day. Because if your day starts off with an argument or starts off bad, it's going to be difficult. If your day starts off amazing, it'll stay amazing. So those are some of the best ways to reach us. When it comes to the camps, so we do have a few camps, and one of the great things is that the camp, we're now running Nature Scholars Program. It's a camp all year long. So if you came next week, you have to bring a group. We can't just take one person, right? But as long as we have a group, we'll bring them. So let's say it's Australia Day and we get a group of Australians. We will bring them into the school and they'll have their own little camp while the school is running. Or Chinese New Year, we'll get mini Chinese. Or, there's so many times throughout the year. And the goal is to be able to have a year-long camp where we call it our Nature Scholars Camp. We do focus on empathy, but we also focus on nature. I mean, we live in Bali, right? Let's teach kids about the true amazingness of nature.
Do you also do corporate? Because so many of my clients would be fascinated to come learn from what you do.
I probably should do that.
Yeah, okay.
I don't do that yet.
10% of royalties.
Sounds good. Come help me teach them.
Okay. Fabulous.
And they can bring their kids too.
Yeah.
So one of the things I used to do that actually led Empathy School is I used to have Empathy Camp, and that was all over the world. And we had adult sessions and mostly focused on nonviolent communication, and then we had kids events. And, it translated to have these kids events, but maybe it's time to have more adult sessions. Come, help me.
Yes, would love to. So at the end of each episode, guest, I ask some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, I'm going to grab some water.
Have a sip. So I know you said earlier, Eric, that it's not just about the children, but it's really is the entire village. You know, the
Mhm.
teachers get involved, the parents get involved. So tell me about some of the best like, kind of
Mm,
success stories or case studies that
okay.
people have had from enrolling their children in your school.
Sure, sure. I can, but first let me explain that whenever you leave wherever
Mm,
you are to come move to, say, Empathy School in
mm,
Ubud, you're leaving your community behind,
mm,
right? So obviously that's a bit of a scary thing to do, but because of that, and because most people have a similar experience there, we build communities so well, so strong. There's
mm,
so many events, mothers events, fathers events, learning events, the Buddhist meditation. So many parents were there the other day, right? So we see this beautiful, this gorgeous international community. We have 40 passports on campus, right?
wow.
There is no majority,
Yeah.
and it's lovely to see this true like human concoction together, just how everyone connects. And and I love that, and it's so important because it in itself, making friends, making connections, is a practice in emotional intelligence, right?
Mm,
But if we look at some of the things that parents have learned, wow, we have a lot of courses. So now I don't want to say every course is a lecture because it's
mm,
not, but I would say the deepest ones are actually sharing, where parents share with each other their own experience, because we all have this perfectionist mentality. Oh, I need to be the perfect parent. There's no perfect parent out there,
mm,
right? We're all going to make mistakes.
mm,
But if we can be honest to each other about it and then honest to our kids, we can stop our kids from having trauma,
mm.
right? I was speaking to one of the parents a while back, and she had parents who fought a lot and did not divorce
Yeah.
whenever she was young, and she is traumatized by that.
Mm,
And after coming, she didn't tell me this on day one, of course, but after coming to many of our sessions, she said, you know what? If my parents just would have been honest and said, hey, we're human, we don't know what we're doing, we don't want to be fighting.
yeah.
And, when I was 10 years old, it would be much easier for me now
Mm,
because I could have understood these concepts. I didn't have the social learning to
mm,
understand. I thought that was normal, is what she
mm.
said. So it's really important that we're honest and connect with each other, because then we can do that with our kids.
Yeah.
Our kids, especially when they're younger, they think we're superheroes, right? Being able to be vulnerable is maybe
Mm,
one of the most important skills to each other and to our kids, because the more vulnerable you are, the more we will connect. The
yeah.
more we will connect, well, the better life will be.
Yeah. Okay, question then. So often in big organizations, I see this all the time. The leaders will be like, you guys need to change. I don't need to change. Have you found that with any of the parents you've been with? Like they want their children
Of
to be more
course.
EQ and they're like, no, no, I'm fine. I'm great. Just
Yes.
work on my kids.
Oh,
So how
yes.
did
We have to. So what we did is eventually in our parent agreement, like if you sign, it says you have to come to some amount of
Oh,
sessions, right?
okay. Yeah.
And the reason was because, like, you see the child, it's like, wow, you're super impressive. Like, you have a 7-year-old speaking like a 60-year-old, like
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the understanding of the world. But then the mother and father, they change a bit based on the child's experience, but
yeah.
they don't know how to communicate correctly. They
Mm,
need communication support. So
mm,
we bring them in. And sometimes we tell them, like, hey, your child's doing really great. And if you want to improve it, we need your help. You will learn this and you can implement it and your life will be better. And it's
mm.
true. It always is. Always is.
I love that. You get a written commitment.
Yeah, it's required. If it's not, people won't show up.
Yeah. And so what are the plans for the next few years for Empathy School?
It's a good question. So my kids are there.
Yep.
So for me, absolutely essential. I'm looking right now. I mean, we have about 2 hectares of land.
Mm.
Not really looking to expand. Looking just to make sure everything is just going really well. My kids are very happy. All the kids are happy. The community is growing and getting stronger. Uh, I think I'm pretty happy with that. And at the same time, I'm working on condensing all the materials so that we can share them later. Like I said, the future is schools like this.
Mm.
So I really see the ability to share all this is what will change the world. And as I mentioned earlier, we have 200 schools right now using our like kindergarten and preschool empathy
Mm.
curriculum around the world, and we'll keep growing it.
And is the plans to then move to high school as well? Or?
Oh, certainly. I mean, my oldest kid is 10 years old.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
some time, but time is not unlimited.
Yeah.
So absolutely, we'll have a high school eventually.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So, I love to talk about the concept of future fitness because to
Mm.
think we can future proof anything is
Mhm.
arrogant and it makes us lazy to think
Yeah.
that we can do that. So, we have to constantly be innovating, learning, and unlearning.
Mhm.
So, how would you finish this sentence? Future fit leadership to me is.
Empathetic leadership. Now, I know I keep saying the word empathy, but the reason for it is if you want to be adaptable, then you must be able to look at yourself. All right, let's say you just lost your job, right? Because it doesn't exist anymore. The industry is gone because of AI. Obviously, that's a very difficult emotional thing. Could you go learn something else? Could you go apply to another job? No, because you're in a very bad emotional state. if you have the ability to empathize with yourself, you can come to a more neutral state very quickly, and then you can take action. So I think the strongest way to get adaptability in a human is to have them be able to communicate with themselves via all these tools that we talked about, via mindfulness, because when we're empathetic, we can change. And when we can change, well, then that's future fit.
Yep, brilliant. A side question to that. There's a well-known saying that says, hurt people hurt people.
Oh, yeah.
And I see now why empathy is the key to self-soothing the hurt within yourself, so you stop hurting other people.
You have to. You can't expect other people to change at all. The only thing you control is yourself. And if you can stop the pain that you have, maybe it's from your childhood, maybe it's from trauma, maybe it's from what happened this morning. But if you can be the one to focus on yourself and you can be the one to understand it, then you can stop all of this. You know, we arrive at a better society by the individual making their own life better.
Second question. What we need more of in the future is? Don't say empathy.
I can't say empathy. I can't say. Okay, no, fine. Sure. I think the world is about to change drastically. I think that no human knows how different the world is going to be, but I see one thing different, and that's one reason I built this school. I built this school because I knew the world was going to change. I didn't expect AI to come so quick, right? But I wanted to make sure my kids were ready for it because I figured it happened in their lifetime. Not when they were 10 and 4, but okay, it's here. So I feel that the model of school that we have, you know, the scientific approach, but out in nature, especially so that families can live in very comfortable environments, I see that as something that will cross the world. Urban environments are not good for kids. Right? I do not agree with any argument that, you know, Beijing or New York or Jakarta are good for kids. It can be great for adults, maybe not great, but you can make money, okay? That's the reason we create these cities. But if you don't have to work in a mega city, why are you? Especially if you can go live, you know, in Ubud, if you can go live in tropical Bali, or maybe another school like this, maybe another one in Brazil, another one in Ecuador, in a beautiful, beautiful location. I see the world leaving these cities, going into these more amazing villages around the world. I don't want to use the word utopia, because every utopia is a cult, but a place that is very comfortable, a place that is very accepting of who you are, and a place that can really give an amazing experience for your child to prepare them for a future that you can't even imagine.
More idyllic for sure. And
The
last
change
one, a future fit organization is one that?
A future fit organization. I would say a future fit organization is one that really values EQ, one that truly understands, because all the evidence is there, that high EQ means good leaders, right? You do not promote people without high EQ, just do not. I have made that mistake in the past. But it's just so wonderful whenever you have someone with high EQ leading, because they can make such better decisions. And, you know, I would say that's it. I would say that is the solution. Now, how companies can get to that is debatable. Again, nonviolent communication is really common in a lot of corporate organizations, and I think that's a really wonderful tool. I wouldn't say there's a single tool that's best. I say continue to explore them.
It's a matter of exploring the buffet, right?
Absolutely.
And choosing what works for your organizational culture, for your,
Because again, all of these tools are human interpretations of something much deeper. And different interpretations will work for different people. And even Vipassana now offers like business and corporate retreats.
Oh,
yes. I haven't been to that one, but that one sounds fun.
All right, fabulous. Eric, thank you so much for your time today. The
Terima
biggest
kasih.
thing that I got from you was we don't need more solutions, we need more connection.
Absolutely.
So that's something that's relevant, whether it's a conversation with your husband, with your kids, with your boss, or your team. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Terima kasih.
And thanks for joining us on another episode of Future Fit by Friska. We'll see you next time.